Ding, 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 ding. What is that? That is the out the door bell for Jim Harbaugh. See ya. He's going to the Chargers. We're starting off the show with breaking news, CD. How does that make you feel?
As well. We were literally planned to go on and record it here. We got some Big Ten stuff to talk about, and what more fitting than talk about Big Ten's champion, national champion, Michigan, right? That big blue M, um, James Harbaugh to the NFL. That is great. I mean, we've kind of been hearing that for a while now. For the past couple years, it's been kind of like, oh, is it the Vikings? Is it the Broncos? Now the Chargers and Falcons interested, and he finally signs on the dotted line there. It's exciting for both Harbaugh gets another shot at the NFL, trying to win a Super Bowl, which we know has been his goal since he was there, so close. And then the power outage happened against his brother John, back in the early 2010s with Colin Kaepernick there in San Fran. Now he's back on the West Coast where he's coached a lot, right? San Diego, University of San Diego, right? We talked about Stanford and obviously with San Francisco in the Bay Area there, and now he's back in LA. But yeah, this is not an NFL podcast, but this is still massive, massive news in the college ranks, right?
Yeah, and we'll get talking about that. Make sure if you're watching the video and you like the content, just like the video. Boom. That's a really easy rule we have there. Like the content, like the video. Right. Make sure you guys are also consider subscribing as well if you want to hear more stuff as we continue to unpack what is this crazy off season. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow, give us a 5-star rating. Make sure you're also following us on Twitter at the Redshirt Soft. Email us with any questions you have at the Redshirt Sophomore at gmail.com. That can be questions, that can be ideas, that can be hey, you guys are doing a really good job. And those are the kind of emails that we love. Those are the kind of emails that we love. But let's talk about Jim Harbaugh for a second. There was a period of time when you and I think, both agreed that it wasn't going to work out for Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was there was
After
a there was a blip.
there was a massive hump at Ohio State that he just tried to get over. And in other big time games, ranked opponents, Michigan State. Remember that his record against Michigan State and Ohio State for his first couple years there was just awful, 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 awful. And then the 2021 season gets around, right? And he loses to Michigan State, if I believe that's right, with Kenneth Walker there.
Yep.
And everyone's like, well, here we go again with Jim Harbaugh. And then he finally gets over the Ohio State hump. Aiden Hutchinson and the boys there take him to the Big Ten championship, and then obviously got demolished down in Miami against Georgia. But then obviously since then, it's kind of just been rinse and repeat in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Yeah. Rinsing. Talk about rinsing. He is rinsing, folks. But no longer will he be doing that. So, and what was interesting is I found the timing very interesting because the timing happens to align with, all the speculations off the field, and a lot of his central talent pool happens to be out the door next year. He just won a national championship. Like, that was his goal. Like, it feels like this is really interesting time. And we've been speculating this for years now that Jim Harbaugh was going to go to the NFL. And it's finally happened. Like, do you think this all has something to do with it? Or do you think he just was ready to go to the NFL again?
Well, I think like correlation is not always causation. Like you see a bunch of things, and it seems like the stars, like you mentioned, just kind of aligned for him to exit here. You mentioned the national championship, you mentioned his core guys, including his quarterback and beloved player JJ McCarthy, a ton of talent walking out the door, which they do have a ton returning, and we'll get into that with 2024 and beyond, what we think about Michigan's program and all that. But obviously, you talk about 2 straight years of flirting with the NFL, and obviously, which he was obviously serious with, taking the famous interview on signing day was crazy, right? It was National Signing Day in February,
Yeah.
and he was interviewing and so for an
What,
NFL
the
job.
Vikings? Or no.
Yeah,
I think he was interviewing the Vikings in January. I
it might
forget.
have been the Broncos. Whoever it was
I don't know.
hilarious and like crazy that he still continued to like keep a fantastic culture, recruit pretty well, not elite, but I think that was part of it. Like if you're a guy in a 23 or 22 kind of guy that's like he, for 2 straight years, it is to negatively recruit that. And it's like, well, it's a good problem to have if you're Jim Harbaugh. Obviously a lot of success at Michigan leads to opportunities in the NFL. But yeah, you mentioned all those things aligned for him. It sounds like this is the perfect opportunity in the NFL for him. You got a guy like Justin Herbert, who obviously we know as college fans pretty well down up over in Eugene, Oregon. Was a 3-year starter for them there. Very, very good. Obviously, talented player, super strong arm, mobility, IQ, all the things you love in a franchise quarterback in the NFL. Hasn't got quite the coaching and success in the win-loss column, but he's put up crazy numbers, and it's obviously it's been a lot of other problems there in Los Angeles for him. It's not quite all his fault. I think Jim Harbaugh sees that, and he sees you got a star left tackle, Rashawn Slater, Northwestern guy. You've got obviously the Bosa on the end there from Ohio State, and guys like Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston, who's getting better maybe. A lot of things you like on that team, and then also there is a vacuum there of I don't want to call it personnel, but it's also like decision making, right? Like they don't have a GM right now. I think part of what he wanted in the NFL was a pretty stable organization, like in terms of player wise. Like you don't have to overhaul the roster. Right? It's a pretty talented roster, and you can also have some decision making power, like you do in college, where you're picking your team, you're recruiting guys, you have a ton of full control over just about everything in the program. And Jim Harbaugh kind of wants to do that Bill Belichick thing where he wants to go in and have a ton of say in who he can draft, who he can recruit, a free agency, and all that good stuff. And I think it's just the stars aligned for him, and this was the right time for him and his family to move on to the NFL. And it sucks for Michigan because it was such a great season, a magical season. Everyone was against the Michigan against the world. Obviously, that we called them a team of destiny on this podcast because of that and everything that happened. They ended up winning it, and we sprinkled some money back in the summer, which we love, we love, we love. And obviously, exciting times for Michigan, but at the same time, this is just a massive deal, especially with the transfer portal rule, which we'll get into. I'm kind of rambling here, but there's just so much to talk about it. Even though we know it's been coming for a couple days, couple weeks, couple years now, we've kind of been gearing up for this leave departure of Harbaugh back to the NFL. But I don't know. There's so much going on. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're a Big Ten expert, so I'm gonna let you ramble, and I'm gonna ask you more questions. All right, one, it feels like the hire is going to be Sharon Moore. We don't know that for sure. For all I know, when the video's out, like it could be for certain, but that's what everything kind of points to right now. I know there was some smoke a couple weeks ago about Brian Kelly, Lance Leipold's been a name, Matt Campbell. I would like you to walk us through how you would feel about Sharon Moore and what your favorite hire would be if it wasn't going to be Sharon Moore.
Okay, yeah, great questions there. Obviously, yeah, the Sharon Moore, it's kind of he almost had his like interview, this season with all that happened with Harbaugh. 6 games, I believe, is the numbers of he fell in. That's half a year, half a regular season for Sharon Moore to get eyes for the players to trust him to run the organization and especially on game day in some big time games. You mentioned Penn State and Ohio State were 2 games that he played in or he coached in as the interim head coach there. So yeah, I think Sharon Moore would be a great fit. And it makes sense, a lot of sense in the building. You know him in a day where roster retention is so difficult. We saw what happened at Alabama. Now, maybe was it a little bit overstated? Was timing pretty bad for a couple of those players? Yes, but obviously Washington, you see Arizona even to a lesser extent, but you see it's tough to maintain your roster when everyone has open season on your team. 30 days, all those guys can leave, and you can't really go out and get anybody immediately to fill those holes. You have to wait till spring portal, so it causes a lot of anxiety and tension in the fan bases for sure. But I do think, to answer your question there with Sharon Moore, yeah, I like it a lot. In terms of other candidates, I mean, you think Brian Kelly has been floated out a lot there. I don't think he would leave LSU for Michigan. Don't know that for sure, but
I'm on
that's
that
obviously
boat too, but there is a lot of smoke for
it's
some reason. Like it wouldn't there has to be some truth to that, Not that Brian
or from
Kelly
someone's corner. Like is there's
from
someone playing an
someone's
angle
corner.
right now, whether it's Michigan or whether it's Sharon Moore trying, or whether it's I guess
Brian
I
Kelly
don't know.
trying to get a little more
Right.
money on
Yeah,
his end.
exactly. So who knows there? I've heard Lance Leipold, obviously a guy that coached in
I
the
would
Midwest.
love that one, by the way.
Yeah.
I would love
Yeah.
that one.
Lance Leipold is an elite developer of talent. Obviously, Michigan has not recruited at an elite level. So a guy that can come in there and win with improve the overall floor of the roster pretty impressively, like he did at
By
Kansas,
elite
Buffalo,
level,
and
you mean a top 5 level, right?
yes, yes, for a team that has consistently been in the
Okay.
national championship picture in the college football playoffs, top four, right? They are not recruiting to the same likes as in recruiting rankings wise. Now they've done a good job of identifying guys that were high 3 stars, low 4 stars, and
And they
developing them.
develop. They
Yeah,
develop. At
but
that school, they develop.
which credit to Harbaugh and staff there, Sharon Moore included. But also, there's a lot of rumors about, Harbaugh taking a lot of staff there. Jesse Minter's a name that has been thrown out a ton to fall under the NFL. Obviously, is a Jay Harbaugh, his son. Obviously a guy that I don't know if Michigan fans are gonna miss too much, but he's a guy that's obviously gonna head out and change the continuity of that staff. Get back to candidates. You Brian Kelly, Lance Leipold, Matt Campbell is a guy that's been thrown around. Some of the regular names that you've heard all throughout the coaching cycle make a ton of sense here. Obviously, real quick, I want to ask you, how good is Michigan's job? Right? Is this an elite job? We've seen Texas A&M open, we've seen Bama open this cycle. Where do you rank them in terms of the Big Ten, but also in college football, the landscape of that in general?
Jobs that I would rather have than the Michigan head coaching job. Georgia,
Yep.
Alabama,
Yep.
Texas,
Yep.
Texas A&M,
Well, okay.
Ohio State. This isn't in any particular order, by the way. Ohio State,
Yep.
LSU, okay,
Oh.
and I'd have to think about finding another one, but I think that's I'll
What
definitely
Oregon?
take those six. Maybe
Oregon?
you like the Nike, you like Phil Knight there.
Especially
I would
in
I would consider
2024 and
Oregon.
beyond, Oregon has improved
Yeah,
their value than it used to be, especially with college football becoming a national recruiting landscape, right? Like Oregon can go out of the West Coast and find a lot of those
yeah,
offensive
yeah.
linemen, defensive linemen that they
Oh,
want.
Florida.
Yeah, Florida is underratedly it hasn't seen the success it's had since the late 2000s, but yeah, that is an elite
I wouldn't take the Florida
program as
State
well.
job based on the situation that school is in right now.
Just the ACC. Exactly. And so the Big Ten, SEC, that stuff matters. Being at a tier one job in those conferences make a massive difference in terms of longevity in the future of college football, but also the payday as well.
Yeah. And
But
job and program are different, right? Job and program are different. Like Michigan is a better program than Texas
Texas
A&M
A&M,
is, Florida is, Texas is right now,
Oregon. I mean, they're on the top of college
Oregon.
board. They are
They won
them,
the national
Georgia,
championship.
Bama. Them, Georgia,
They're
Bama
a
are top three in any order you want. Probably Georgia, Michigan, Bama.
yes,
And
but
then, yeah.
the Michigan head coaching job, unless you are an elite national recruiter, right? It's a harder job than Ohio State, I think. It's a harder job.
Oh, yes. Well, in the thing Ohio State does has expectations, but you also look at what he's doing right now at Ryan Day, in the portal, which we'll get to obviously in our Big Ten breakdown and recap of the year. But the first thing I did when I saw this, right, and I was like, okay, Jim Harbaugh, what am I going to talk about? Well, first of all, like the 30-day window, I think cannot be overstated. Even if Sherrone Moore is hired up, right, which is a massive deal, and that helps with roster continuity, right? Kalen DeBoer went to Alabama, a guy that did not recruit or talk with or interact with any of these recruits and players and families, right? Nobody knew who he was outside of the past maybe month or so in terms of on a national level. And he has to go in there and convince them to stay and to, yes, they committed to Nick Saban in Alabama, but they want him to commit to him in about, an hour or so team meeting. The first thing I did was pull up Michigan's depth chart, right? Guys that Michigan and Sherrone Moore has to keep for the next year. They got big time news in Junior Colson returning, right? Which was massive for them. And obviously Ernest Hausman will still be there at linebacker, but you lose Michael Barrett, I believe, and you lose Jalen Harrell, I believe, as also. Um, but yeah, so Junior Colson's a guy that obviously seems committed to Michigan, but who knows? Rod Moore, I believe, is coming back. If I'm not mistaken, he's their stud safety in the second, staying in the secondary. Obviously, Will Johnson, a lot has been made of him. A guy that started for 2 straight years for you since he's been a true freshman. He's a guy that a lot of people will be excited about. Going to the D line, Mason Graham is a just monster up the middle. Him and Kenny Grant are two true sophomores that really feasted and made that front seven what it was. And then obviously on the offense side of the ball, you lose a ton of offensive linemen anyways to graduation in the NFL draft. But Colson Loveland as your tight end there. He's a guy, freaky athlete, a guy they really got involved and made some big time plays in the passing games, in their big games, especially in the conference there. So yeah, those are some names I really circle. Obviously, you've got some teams with some holes to fill, and obviously those guys who have won a national title, played in a ton of big time games, coached and developed by very good coaches. You'd love to add them to your roster. So that to me, that's step one. If you're Sharon Moore, you're quietly putting together a staff. At the same time, you also have to make those guys a priority on keeping them because as you see in some programs, you just keep a couple keystone players at the top there, and then they can do the work to really convince everybody else to stay and buy in to the future of Michigan football.
Yeah, I think locking down Sharon Moore is a big deal. We saw it happen to Alabama. Like you mentioned it. Like it makes it a lot easier for that continuity. And the players believe in Sharon Moore. I mean, he won big ball games there for them. Basically won a Big Ten championship as their head coach. Basically did that.
Yeah, and especially in the regular season. And yeah, Jim Harbaugh coached against Iowa, but they had no chance to win that game anyways. And also think about this here. I believe you were the one that talked about it before we went on air tonight was Michigan, University of Michigan, and the state of Michigan, because there's a public institution in the state of Michigan, that job has to be open for quote unquote 7 days, right? Whatever that means. I'm sure they can get waivers and whatnot, but you mentioned they have to act quickly, right? And the thing is here is if they're going to open up to a quote unquote national hire and to open up the job to anyone that can, they can recruit and interview guys, they have to be confident, and that's the direction they're going to go in because you have to work quickly. You have to give these players a ton of confidence in who they are coming in and get. You have to control the narrative. If you're the AD of Michigan and you're the president of Michigan, you have to control the narrative because they can spin it and players can easily lose trust and they can just hop on the portal and they would have, you know, money bags being thrown at them left and right. And obviously you don't want that, even that opportunity to happen there.
Yeah, absolutely earth-shattering news in the Big Ten. Ohio State fans are celebrating. Yeah, this is crazy. This is crazy. So we will continue to follow this story as it develops with, potentially Sharon Moore. If they for some reason decide to go in a different direction, which, I'm not opposed to either. This will be really, really interesting to follow. So thank you guys for allowing us to, yeah, well, you got something else?
Yeah, real quick, I do want to say, and I want to get your thoughts on this in terms of like what goes into making this higher in terms of like valuing short-term goals and short-term roster, keeping that together, but also long-term. Like, let's say you believe in Sharon Moore and you think he's a B plus guy, right? And you're like, hey, we like him a lot. I don't know if we love him, but we also love the fact that he will keep that roster together in the short term. But we don't know if he's going to be a guy that can continue to compete on a national championship type level. Whereas if you had options like an A hire like Brian Kelly or maybe Lance Leipold or some guy you feel is a slam dunk home run guy for the University of Michigan, if you're the AD, how do you balance the two?
Here's here's my thoughts. If I was the AD, I hire Sharon Moore, and I'll tell you why. There's you hear about a lot of different examples of, interim head coaches like coming in and getting the head coaching job. In those situations, it isn't always the right thing to do, right? That's the thing that the players want, sure, okay, but sometimes the culture that's built into that program, right, isn't always, the best one. Like if say if a coach got fired, right, or if extraneous circumstances where the coach is relieved of his duties, right? In this scenario, this team has had a consistent culture of development, work ethic. This culture is already there. The winning national championship culture is already there. So my thought is, why would you like? You should do everything in your power to try to keep that there while you have it. And that means, yeah, sure, like guys like Jesse Minter will go to the, with Jim Harbaugh and some other folks on staff, but if Sharon Moore stays, you know, your strength and conditioning team still stays, right? Your some of your analysts are still there. Your equipment team is still in there. Like you still like you get your training staff, like everything is still in place that you need to win, right? It's just can Sharon Moore, can you put together some other pieces of his staff that can recruit at even a higher level when while the Big Ten is becoming more competitive? That's the question. So I think he could do that. We'll see. But that's what I would do. And that's what I value in this particular situation. That's why I think it's such an interesting situation because this team won a national championship and their coach is leaving. I don't know.
Yeah.
When was the last time we saw that?
It's 1998, I believe, was I saw a stat. I believe it was the 90s with Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken, or was it not Florida State? Whatever it was, it was. And first of all, a totally different era with the transfer portal, right? Back then, the coach leaves unless you're an NFL draft guy. Like you don't
The
that new
culture's
coach
still there.
doesn't have to worry about exactly that. Those new players doesn't have to worry about it. I look back to Ohio State and Oklahoma, right? Bob Stoops and Urban Meyer leaving those respective programs, and obviously Ryan Day took over for Urban Meyer, and Lincoln Riley took over for Oklahoma and Bob Stoops, and I think those kind of guys was where like they were almost handpicked, and I wonder if Jim Harbaugh had to say, or it was like, hey, Stromore, don't take the Purdue job last year. Like, stay here. I'm going to be out the door in a couple of years here at least, and the job will be yours. And I want you. And there was a succession plan, which we thought Nick Saban had in Steve Sarkisian. That obviously Texas came calling, and that went out the door, and they had to pivot. And obviously they did a nice job pivoting to Kalen DeBoer. But yeah, here it sounds like that's a similar thing there. And those two programs, I think, had success. Now, obviously, the national championships have not been there, those programs, but also like Ryan Day has won more than just about anybody else since taking over, right? And Lincoln Riley did they're very good jobs winning Heisman trophies, getting the college football playoffs, and obviously moving on to USC. But yeah, I do think that that's a really interesting point you make there.